Welcome once again, everybody, to a new edition of VIP Visits. And today I'm very happy and excited to welcome a friend of mine who has been both a friend and a colleague for quite some time. And he's definitely a VIP because he's a wonderful writer, a very knowledgeable historian, and it's Michael Lyons. Michael, welcome to VIP Visits.
Hey, Jim, good to see you again. And we have been friends and colleagues for some time. I was thinking about that. I think it's been well over 25 years that we've known each other. So I'm excited to be here. I thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to our conversation, as I always do with you.
Yes, I agree. We always have, whenever we talk for whatever reason, we always have a very enjoyable time. You always have a lot of insights and a lot of fun facts to share formally or informally. So
we always feed very well off each other.
Yes, exactly. So to start off, I do have a question for you, and that is, who is your favorite Disney character, and why is it Robin Hood?
I don't know whatever gave that away.
That's right.
But my favorite Disney character is actually Prince John from Robin Hood. Robin Hood is my personal favorite Disney film. I know in my heart of hearts that many may not consider it one of the studio's best, made during a challenging time at the studio. But for me, it's the Disney movie that I grew up with. Saw it in Radio City Music Hall when it opened in 1973. So I have great memories of that. There was a lot of Robin Hood merchandise when that movie came out, and I was 7 years old at the time, so I was of the perfect age. And it was re-released a lot throughout my childhood, so I saw it a lot in the theaters, and my parents would take me to the theaters in the days before home video. That's how you watched movies over and over again before streaming. Streaming was when you actually went out to the theater to see the movie. Your parents had to take you instead of just hitting the remote. And yeah, we saw Robin Hood quite a bit in theaters. And then years later, I had the opportunity to meet Ollie Johnston and to tell him that Prince John was my favorite character, and he had some wonderful stories to share. So for me, Robin Hood is at the top of the list, along with Snow White and Pinocchio and Lion King and Frozen and a lot of the other big classics and blockbusters.
Well, we all have our favorites, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And, you can't go wrong. You really can't go wrong with any of the Disney animated features. You are the podcast master as far as I'm concerned. I wanted to ask you about the background of your Disorder podcast, which I won't even try to describe. I'm going to let you tell us about it. And anybody that hasn't heard it is in for a treat, I think. It's quite an ambitious project, and I'm happy to see that it's continuing. So why don't you tell everyone what it is and what it's all about?
Thank you for always the nice words about the podcast as well. So Disorder grew out of an episode of a podcast that I was a guest on called Real Fans for Real Movies. And my good friend Andy DiGenova and I both love Hunchback of Notre Dame. And he had a friend who I met through him called Hunter Fagan, who also loved Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame. So we recorded an episode in 2016 for the 20th anniversary of that film. And we really enjoyed doing it and talking about the movie. And Hunter and Andy then had some conversation, and they came up with this idea to create an entirely separate podcast where we would look at every Disney animated film in chronological order, starting with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and going up to then in 2017 when we were starting it, whatever the latest animated film was going to be. And they invited me to be on it. And I was like, heck yeah, I'll be a part of that and share my memories and talk about every Disney animated film. So that was how Disorder, every Disney film, started back in 2017 with Snow White. And about every month, maybe we would have some episodes on twice a month. we would go through then Pinocchio, Fantasia, and we went all the way up to Raya and the Last Dragon, which we just reviewed last fall. And that is considered our season one, where we talked about each of the animated films in chronological order. And it was an interesting journey for all of us to go on, because we would never really tell each other what we thought of the movie before we got on. I knew, hanging out with Andy through the years, what he thought of some of the movies. So it was interesting to hear everyone's perspective. Age-wise and generationally, the three of us are from three different generations, so we had different perspectives there. But we also got to go on the journey of, Disney history. We started with Walt's first full-length animated feature. We then went through, all the way through the 50s to after Walt's passing, into the 70s, the 80s, the Renaissance movies of the 90s, and then, all the way up to the more recent films. And, we're working out when we're going to do Encanto, because that will be next, and that'll go in our season one. And right now we're in what we call our season two, which is, it's kind of a grab bag of different topics. We'll do a lot of listener polls. So we will put a poll out on social media and put 3 Disney movies out there and say, which of these movies would you like us to discuss? For example, at Christmas time, we put up Mickey's Christmas Carol, Disney's Christmas Carol with Charles Dickens, and Muppet Christmas Carol, and let everyone vote. And Muppet Christmas Carol won. So that was the Christmas Carol that we talked about. We've celebrated anniversaries like The Rocketeer last summer, 30th of Rocketeer. So it's given us some freedom to discuss, some of the movies that aren't in that chronological order, and some of the Pixar films now too. So we discussed Toy Story last year, and next up for us is Bug's Life as well. So as a Disney fan and somebody who, like you, is inspired by so many of the Disney films and Disney history, it's been great to be a part of the podcast for sure.
As a listener, believe me, it's great to hear it. You all three have such great insights, and you're all three very humorous. So there's a lot of laughs along the way. It's very entertaining, and there is definitely information. But it is quite fascinating to hear 3 different perspectives on a given movie from, as you say, maybe generational, or maybe just the way that you discovered the movie or what have you. It's fascinating to hear the different perspectives.
It really is. And what's interesting too is you brought up, when I was talking about Robin Hood before, and you said that's the great thing about Disney movies, it is that no matter if they're one of the blockbusters, one of the classics, everyone loves them. And we say on the podcast, each, especially the Disney animated movies, each Disney animated movie is somebody's favorite. We have discussed, even some of the package films on the podcast. We've had the listeners write in and say, oh my gosh, I love Make Mine Music. It's my favorite Disney animated movie. And it's really something to think about, the breadth of the Disney animated catalog and how each one is someone's favorite for whatever reason.
I do like 3 people of your caliber taking them all seriously. And even if somebody doesn't like a certain movie or likes it less than the other 2 or what have you, it's a serious opinion. It's for the most part, it's not, just, oh, that thing, let's move on to something more interesting. It's really interesting. And you don't get a chance to do that very often. You can, you can read articles, and you and I have written articles about things, but that's always more from a historical standpoint. I like hearing the different insights, and it really makes me think as well. And I always hear opinions that I had not considered, or maybe opinions is not the right word, but like, as I say, insights.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy it. And I really enjoy this new phase you're in, where you're doing, you're more all over the map. Of course, I loved The Rocketeer.
Yes.
That's one of my favorites. I love that you brought Darby O'Gill and the Little People to the table.
One of my favorites.
Yes, and mine too. So I ate that episode up. And it's great. It's great fun. It really is. So you talked about listener feedback. What is some of the feedback you've gotten from some of your listeners? You've already mentioned some people have said a package film is their favorite. Have you heard some surprising opinions, like maybe some dissenting opinions or what have you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There have been opinions like that where it's somebody's favorite film, but a lot of the listeners are very very of that mindset of, we know that your taste isn't going to be like our taste. They might say, oh, you were a little harsh on this movie, but I grew up with it, and here's how I
Yeah.
So that's been great too, and that the listeners, through those kind of dissenting opinions, share their memories. We just decided to put a listener poll out there for some of the direct-to-video sequels, just because that wasn't a road we had gone down. And the one that wound up being chosen was The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, which there were listeners who commented on the post on Facebook when the episode went live about how that's the Disney movie they grew up with, because they were part of that generation where the direct-to-video movies came out, and the movies themselves came out on video. So,
right.
and they completely respected that, if we didn't think it was, of the caliber of a theatrical film, they said, I get it, but I love this movie, and here's why. It's kind of like I said about Robin Hood. I've heard some dissenting opinion of Robin Hood through the years, and I get it, but I love it because it's the Disney movie that I grew up with. And something else interesting about the listeners too is we've gotten some amazing letters, some inspiring letters. It's incredible to be reading a letter, or Andy or Hunter's reading a letter, and the letter begins, "Greetings from Finland. We listen to your podcast over here," or we've had several people write in that they were going through rough times in their life, or battling cancer, and while they were going through chemotherapy treatments, they were listening to the podcast, and it's a very humbling experience to think these challenging moments in your life, the three of us joke that we would have had these conversations anyway. We're just recording them and putting them out there,
Yes.
And they've become very meaningful to some people out there. So that goes right to your heart. That's really nice to hear.
That is wonderful. It really reminds you of the miracle of modern technology.
Yeah.
Where anybody can hear. I mean, even like radio stations, used to be, if you were hearing a great radio station in your area, well, who outside your area could hear it? But now, like, take KCRW here in Los Angeles, which is very famous for being a superior, radio station. They play eclectic music and have great news programs and all kinds of things. Yeah. Well, who could hear that years ago? Now they have listeners all over the world. It is amazing that podcasts, and certainly there are famous people that have podcasts, but anybody can start a podcast and reach people with their opinions, their insights, their unique personalities. It's amazing to me.
It really is. It really is. I mean, to your point, Jim, you now hear people saying, I listen to podcasts, when I'm driving back and forth to work, or right. If I work from home, I have one on in the background, or when I'm exercising, or I go out for a walk. So it's funny how they've become they've become company for us. They really have.
Yeah. I can't remember how I discovered Disorder, if you had told me about it, or maybe just on Facebook or something like that, but that's a good one for me.
Well, thanks. And like I said, we appreciate your support of the show, and it's kind of, nice knowing that, a Disney historian, Disney fan like you appreciates it as well. So thank you.
Well, that's another question when you come to that. What, in terms of your listeners, do you ever hear from, say, animators or artists in the animation industry, or do you ever hear from other Disney writers or historians?
We haven't. We've had a Disney writer and historian on. We had Greg Ehrbar, who he wrote the book Mouse Tracks about the history of Walt Disney Records. He was on our Alice in Wonderland episode, as a matter of fact, because he is a huge Alice in Wonderland fan. We haven't heard from many people in the industry, but what we do hear a lot from are people who want to be in the industry in the future. They're listening to the podcast because they want to be a Disney animator somewhere down the road. They want to work for Disney, maybe at one of the theme parks, or work for the company in some capacity. They're a Disney fan that wants to be a part of the company down the road. So nobody currently in the industry, but I think we hear from a lot of future folks who will be joining Disney. Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting in itself, just to know you're inspiring people and also informing them and filling them in. So we need more cast members and more Disney employees that know something about Disney. What a concept.
Yeah.
And that reminds me, I'm going to interrupt our flow of conversation here, because I did want to ask you, growing up in Long Island and Walt Disney World opening at that time, when was the first time you went to Walt Disney World?
Yeah, I did not get a chance to go to Walt Disney World until I was 21 years old, until 1987. For whatever reason, it was just, we always took local vacations growing up in New York. You would drive. We were right near the beach, so we were very fortunate during the summer. We would go to the beaches a lot. We would go to upstate New York. There were a lot of kind of bed and breakfast type places we would go to there, or the east end of Long Island. But it was 1987 was the first time I went, and I was in college, and my mind was blown. My mind was completely blown. I think that kind of set me on a path of knowing what I wanted to do going on that vacation, because I had always heard of Walt Disney World, but even as an adult, it felt like this unreal thing in New York, that there was a place, whether it was Walt Disney World or Disneyland, that was open every day of the year, that was all about Disney, that you could go to whenever you wanted to. And, you could go on these attractions that you had only heard of or seen on television, that, as a kid, you could meet the characters. That was incredible for me when I would see The Wonderful World of Disney and they would show the characters in the parade and the opening montage. That was incredible, because I remember going to, and you did a video segment on this once, on Disney on Parade. And I remember going to see that show, and that was magical. And to me, like, Walt Disney World was Disney on Parade every single day. So, going there, and, everything that I knew about, quote unquote, amusement parks, because I know this was a theme park, everything I knew about amusement parks was much different in New York, much different. Coney Island, Rockaway's Playland in Rockaway, New York. And to go to this place where you walked into Main Street, USA, and the music was playing, and there was Cinderella Castle, and then at night, at dusk, the lights would come on. I came home, and I had been somewhat almost directionless, even though I was in my early 20s, figuring out what I wanted to do next. And I said, what I want to do next is to do something where, I either write about Disney or I go to work for Disney. So it was not only a wonderful vacation, and I returned many times after, but I feel like it gave me direction in my life.
Well, a lot of people may not know that you also ended up being a cast member at Walt Disney World for a good number of years. And you were you had opportunities to bring your vast knowledge of Disney to bear and to inspire people and to fill in some of the cast members too. I know you did like a kind of a newsletter or an email blast at one time, and did some seminars, and that's great.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I worked for Walt Disney World here in Florida from 2000 to 2020, so I was there for 20 years. I forget who it was early on who heard about my background of Disney history and heritage. And there was an organization at the time that would put on presentations for the cast members who worked at Disney. And some of them would be on furthering your career or writing the perfect resume. And then there were others that were on Disney history. And there was a gentleman named Jim Korkis, who's a well-known writer about Disney history and animation history. And he was working for Disney at the time. And I went to one of his presentations, and I worked as a writer before joining Disney. And Jim and I had written for the same magazine. And I went up to Jim afterwards, introduced myself, and talked to him. And he said, "You should do these presentations." And he helped me and guided me. And for several years there, I did presentations, usually around anniversaries. With Disney, I did one on the 50th anniversary of Alice in Wonderland. Once again, it keeps coming back to Alice in Wonderland. But
no wonder I'm showing it here on the TV, right?
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I was, I was very honored to become one of the Disney history guys there. That folks would come to anytime they needed that bit of pixie dust in their role. And I used to send out an email called Friday's Fascinating Facts that I had inherited from a gentleman named Don Livonius, who started it. And it was an email blast that went out on Fridays. And it was usually a little article about Disney history as well. And the great thing about that was Dave Smith was then with the archive. We were talking about Dave Smith before we recorded. And, he was on the company email. I sent him an email one time and said, "Dave, would you mind fact checking this before I sent it out?" And he said, "Absolutely, I'd be happy to." So it's incredible to think that I used to send that email to Dave Smith on Mondays. He would send me back some edits, and then I would send it out. And I always felt so much more comfortable sending it out, knowing that Dave Smith had looked at this and reviewed it and given his insight and his opinion and whatever corrections were needed. But I'm very grateful to Jim for saying you should facilitate these. Very grateful to people like Don, who gave me that email, and Dave Smith, who helped me out, because working for Walt Disney World was a wonderful experience, and I grew personally and professionally working for the resort. But I feel like I was also able to give back and educate some cast members who work there on the history of the company. I used to teach a class for college program cast members. So for those who don't know, Disney has a college program, and college students can come and work at Walt Disney World for certain sections of the year. And one of the presentations I did for them was on Walt and television. And we would show 1 Hour in Wonderland, and we would show the Mickey Mouse Club. And it was so interesting that, I would have to set up with them, "You're going to watch TV shows that are in black and white," because they had never seen, really had not been used to black and white television. But what was so great is all of the college program students would come up afterwards and say, "What books can you recommend? What websites can I go on? How do I learn more about this? You mentioned the Disney Archive, like what is that?" So you could see just by talking to them about Disney history, you open their mind to the history of the company. And also what was great for them was it grounded them in the fact that by working for Disney, they were now part of Disney history. So I really am grateful to have been able to do that.
Well, that's great. I know I read a lot of those Friday emails myself, and they were always so well done and just delightful, and told me things I didn't know too. So
well, thank you. I was writing them. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing that you bring to your podcast appearances. And I think it's also worth noting that you have a wide scope as a historian. It's not just Disney animation and Disney, which would be great enough as it is, but you also know a lot about all kinds of animation, all kinds of TV. That makes me think of another podcast that you're involved with on and off. I think you already mentioned it. It's the other podcast that both Andy and Hunter are involved in. Do I have that right?
Yeah, Andy is on it consistently. Hunter comes on like I do as a guest.
Okay.
And it's called Real Fans for Real Movies. And this was a podcast that, once again, Andy brought me in to this fold. And the Real Fans for Real Movies podcast network is actually really cool because They have several podcasts that kind of fall under their network. One of them is Disorder, Every Disney Film. Obviously, Real Fans for Real Movies is the one that started it, where they talk about new movies and celebrate older movies and do top 10 lists and bottom 10 lists. But they also have a Holy Backcast, which is all about Batman. They have Please Rewind, which takes a look at movie anniversaries. So if you're into movies, TV shows, animation, that's a great kind of network of podcasts to seek out. But on the Real Fans for Real Movies show, they focus on movies, but Andy and we always say we're brothers from another mother, because we always, we have so many likes. We like a lot of the same things, and we love holidays. And Andy, gosh, now I want to say it's now about 8 years ago, Andy came up with an idea of doing what he would call the Real Fans for Real Movies Halloween special, where we would come on and each talk about our favorite Halloween special. And we thought we were doing it once. You know, we thought this was going to be the only year. And we did a Christmas episode that same year. We wound up coming back and doing it each and every year, I want to say since 2013. We branched out into other holidays too. We do Thanksgiving. We did one New Year's episode because we could only really find one New Year's special, which was Happy New Year, Charlie Brown. So we talked about that. And we did an Easter episode as well. And our fellow best friend Scott Hopkins joins us for those. And then there's another good friend of ours, Brendan Lowe, who's in Australia, who loves Christmas, who joins us for all of the Christmas episodes. And we love doing them because we love holidays, but we love trying to find, now it's a challenge trying to find something each year, because we talked about, if you just look at Christmas, we've talked about Charlie Brown and Frosty and Rudolph and Year Without a Santa Claus and Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So we've branched out into episodes of TV shows or really seldom seen or rarely seen or never seen specials. And that's usually the speciality of my friend Scott, who loves seeking out what he calls lost media and finding these specials. But we love doing it because for years, Andy now lives here in Florida, but he lived out in California for years, and we were all spread out. So for us, it was a way to kind of gather for the holiday as well and have a bit of a holiday celebration as a podcast. And the listeners have come to enjoy it as well, because it dusts off the cobwebs of memories they had of TV specials or TV episodes that centered on the holidays.
Well, I'm one of those listeners, believe me, and I only relatively recently discovered it. Probably like 3 years ago. I think it might have been my search for Thanksgiving type podcasts and historical things that made me discover it, because Thanksgiving is especially challenging of the three holidays. There's more than there used to be, but there didn't used to be a whole lot of Thanksgiving specials. So I was like, oh my gosh. And then when I found out how many years you guys have been doing it, I just listened to those Christmas episodes one after another. And every year now I'm like, when are you going to do your new episode? Where is it? Where's the Halloween? Where's the Thanksgiving? Where's the Christmas? So for everybody who loves the holidays, specials and TV shows and podcasts, this is made for you. So I highly recommend it. And I mean, you guys do everything, as you said, from TV comedies, episodes of TV comedies, to obscure things like Pac-Man, the Pac-Man Christmas special.
Yeah, Christmas in Pac-Land. That was Andy's this year. Yeah.
I knew about it, but it had to have been at the bottom of my, interest level. But you guys made it very, very fascinating. So I didn't get to it this year. You pointed out it was on Boomerang, and I get Boomerang. So I watched a little of it, but I didn't get around to watching the whole thing. So next Christmas, I've got to see it. And I know I will enjoy it, and I will laugh at all the fun things you pointed out and the unintentionally fun things you pointed out.
You'll never watch some of the specials the same again.
But I really emphasize to our listeners that I find you very funny, and your senses of humor mesh very well, and you're all like building on each other. So it's really fun.
Well, thank you. And we say about those specials that, we'd probably be having these conversations anyway. We're just recording them. Andy is extremely funny. Andy tried his hand for a while at stand-up comedy, and he was very good.
Oh, wow.
Andy is very good he's very quick. He's got a fantastically quick sense of humor. And I feel like when he starts going down the road of throwing a joke out there, he gets the whole show going. Like that really fuels the rest of us. And there'll be an in joke and a joke that carries over through the whole episode. So, I think the humor starts all the way here at Andy, and it kind of fans out to the rest of us from there.
Well, it definitely works. And I love it on both the podcasts, Disorder as well. And I was really fascinated with your end of season, your season finale, your kind of wrap up when you're kind of shifting gears. I really enjoyed hearing you talk about a variety of subjects, but it led to great things like, gee, what should we do now? Well, let's do the Sister Act franchise. Let's cover that. And then somebody was pointing out, well, if you're going to do a franchise, you really have to cover every movie. And you were like, right, because what about Herbie Goes Bananas? It really doesn't make sense if you haven't seen them all.
It doesn't. You have to watch them all, and in order too.
And in order, disorder, we might say.
That's right.
So there's all kinds of jokes and humor, and I especially like the Herbie Goes Bananas one because it was funny in what was said, and it was funny in what was not said. Right. So, you sly dog. I wanted to ask you about your social media presence so that people can follow you. I know you have a fantastic website, and you're on, the traditional social media platforms, and also any projects you have coming up.
Yeah. So, probably one place I always throw out there is Twitter. So at MLyonsFL, if anyone wants to give a follow. But I do write a blog, Screensaver, a retro review of TV shows and movies of yesteryear that looks back at old TV shows and movies, whether they're celebrating an anniversary or themed to a time of year like a holiday. And I do contribute to both of Jerry Beck's websites, Animation Scoop and Cartoon Research. And if anyone's looking for any of my work or projects that I'm working on, I do have a website, wordsfromlions.com. So it's wordsfromlions, Lyons.com. And if you go there, there's a section where you can actually sign up to get on the email list. I promise not to inundate your inbox, but anytime I do have a new episode of Disorder or a new article or an update on a project that I'm working on, I do send out an email blast. So it's an easy kind of one-stop shop to then come back to the website where there's links to everything from there. And I'll also keep everyone updated on two future projects I have coming up in the near future. One is another podcast that I'm working on with my friend Scott, who I mentioned. It's called From Pencils to Pixels, the Animation Celebration Podcast, where Scott and I are going to get on and just talk about our favorite animated TV show, movies, and short subjects. And we've recorded several episodes, and we're getting those ready. And what I love about that is I have a very traditional love of animation, the animated films, and Scott seeks out those lost media pieces of animation. So he discusses a lot of that. And I'm very happy and proud to say that I've written my first book, which is called Drawn to Greatness, Disney's Animation Renaissance. So I was lucky enough to cover a lot of the big Disney movies of the 90s, like Lion King and Hunchback of Notre Dame, and all the way up through Emperor's New Groove. And I interviewed the artists who worked on those movies for the magazines I wrote for. And I had all those interviews, and I've collected them in this book to tell the story of that amazing period in Disney history, in Disney animation history, where there was this incredible growth and resurgence at Disney, starting with The Little Mermaid and going throughout that entire decade of the 90s. So it's called Drawn to Greatness, Disney's Animation Renaissance. It'll be published by Theme Park Press, and I will keep everybody updated through the website, and I'll keep you updated as well, Jim.
Thank you. Well, I can't wait to read it. I did get kind of a sneak peek thanks to you. And everything I read was fantastic. Your interviews, of course, are great. And to look back and think you were able to talk to all those folks at the time that these movies were being made is quite incredible. So there's some real gems and among the the information and the fun facts, as we say.
Thank you for taking a sneak peek and a look at it, and your input and insight, and I'm excited to share it with you and everyone else.
Yeah, and we'll definitely have you back on VIP Visits.
I would love that.
Great. Well, we love having you.
Yeah, well, Jim, thank you. It's always great. First off, it's always great to see you and talk to you and catch up.
Same here.
I'm very honored and flattered that you invited me on to talk a little bit about my history and my experiences and what I'm doing. So thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Well, absolutely. It's been my pleasure. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching. And I'll see you next time for another edition of VIP Visits.